Welcome back. Next up is Aimée Llewellyn-Zaidi from the International Partnership for Dogs with her presentation, Science Made Simple, talking to new puppy owners about genetic health results. Aimée is the project director for the International Partnership for Dogs, the Harmonization of Genetic Testing in Dogs project. The IPFD is a nonprofit global organization which brings together scientists, breeders, veterinarians, and others to share information, collaborate, and put into action initiatives to enhance dog health, welfare, and better support human-dog interactions. Through the HGTD project, IFPD is improving the standardization of and access to robust genetic testing to support improved health and a sustained future for all breeds of dogs. What a great mission. Thank you, Aimée. Take it away.
Thank you, Lisa. What a wonderful introduction. I'm so happy to be here and talking to you all today. To kick it off, pardon me. Today's talk is going to be reviewing a little bit about understanding and interpreting health test results. If you were here earlier and listening to Jenna's wonderful talk, you probably also had some of this information. So I will be efficient when talking about that with you today. I wanted to explore a little bit about the value of health testing for dogs, for breeders, and for puppy buyers, particularly focusing on how breeders might want to communicate to prospective puppy buyers the value of the investment that you're putting into your dogs. A little bit about the benefits around whole litter testing, whether it's worth it for you and for your plans, and how it benefits both your breeding plans and your breed as a whole, and to talk a little bit about some of the free education support and research information that's available from IPF Dogs. I'm sure and I'm confident that Embark has wonderful resources directly related to the test results and the products they provide, but if there's health information that's kind of beyond genetic testing, or if you would like to triangulate a little bit of that information, we have other resources available that can help support you on that. So just a little overview about health testing and really why we all invest so much time and energy in this. And if you're new to health testing, particularly genetic testing, this might, incentivize you or give you confidence in why you might want to put some energy into health testing, particularly for pre-breeding, but really to talk about how the benefits last generations. I really like to think about genetic testing and health testing in terms of three areas of benefit: your own dog's individual health, which I know is very important to people, breeding decisions, how you might want to match pairs to kind of balance and reduce health risks, and to puppy owners who are going to be raising and owning and loving those next generations of dogs. For your own dog health, if you undertake clinical examinations, they can identify any current risks that may occur in your dog and inform on future risks, such as late onset diseases, which may happen later in life, and also inform about maybe what you might want to consider when in terms of breeding selection and choices in pairing dogs for mating. Genetic test results can be extremely beneficial in identifying current and future risks, particularly when it comes to supporting good breeding decisions, and they can occasionally aid in diagnoses as well. For breeding decisions, if you have that information being power coming from those clinical exams or genetic test results, helps you to reduce or completely eliminate risks for future generations of dog breeding, and it gives you more options and control in breeding choices, particularly with genetic tests, where the information tends to give you a pretty good degree of precision about how you can make healthy and supportive breeding choices. For puppy owners, and that's the category I primarily fall under as a dog owner, it helps to identify any potential risks or late onset conditions in the future, which means that you can put in preventative measures with veterinary support, or if there's no known genetic risks or clinical risks, it can reduce some worries, particularly in diseases or conditions that are associated with particular breeds. But more importantly, in some ways, at least from my personal perspective, is that it's a clear demonstration that you are a responsible breeder if you're undertaking the investment in providing not only the exam results as part of your breeding plans, but providing that result and information to the puppy owners directly. And if you know what may be coming in the future, if you know what risks you don't necessarily have to worry about, it can help with costs of veterinary care to be preventative where possible, and to perhaps worry a little less about the areas that you know are not going to be concerns for your dog. So what kind of health tests are available? Well, I gave you a little hint in the last slide, but there's um, two kind of primary categories. There's clinical tests or screening schemes that tend to look at complex conditions or diseases. Some examples being maybe heart schemes that some of you would be familiar with, or hip and elbow dysplasia that is not uncommon in our medium to larger breeds. And even things like behavioral tests or examinations can be part of that information. Health schemes are great for dog health and can help with breeding decisions as well as informing on your own dog's health. And you can find a lot of breed and breed type specific tests on dogwellnut.com and other places such as your own kennel or breed club information. If you happen to have a breed or a type of a dog that doesn't currently have a breed club, perhaps you're joining us from someplace outside of America where you may have different registration bodies, it can be useful to look on international sites like Dog Walnut to see what else is available and what is out there. But it can also be useful to consider looking at your origin breeds or the breeds that were used to develop your current breed or current type in order to be fully informed about what diseases may be relevant, disease tests, I should say, may be relevant or important to your breed. For genetic tests, what kind of genetic health tests are available? Generally speaking, there are single variant tests, which means there's sort of one mutation that is perhaps the cause of the challenges or the proteins in your gene test to not be working or functioning properly. There are also risk or complex inherited genetic tests that may identify a number of different genes or variants that are of concern or less than ideal. There's also genetic fingerprinting, or some people call it permanent ID, which is a great way of making sure that you have that genetic code and information about your individual dog. There's parentage testing, which is increasingly important and valuable, particularly for registration. Some companies also provide genetic diversity testing, or COI, coefficient of inbreeding testing. I know that Embark is one of those groups. And there's, I call it breed estimation, but some people call it breed identification. If you have a mixed or crossbreed dog, you can get information about what breeds may have been in the melting pot to create your very unique dog. The benefit of genetic testing in particular is genetic tests have the most predictive power. And what I mean by predictive power is that the way they work allows you a greater degree of precision as they look at the genetics or the ingredients of how our dogs are created and developed, rather than what is observable by the eye in clinical or in screening examinations, so the phenotype of the dog. There is always greater power and greater control when you're able to understand the genotype, what makes up your dog and what your dog may pass on, than the phenotype. But sometimes we don't have tests for clinical exams, so you have genetic tests for clinical exams, so you have to kind of make your best decisions on the information you have. So you probably are familiar what an inherited disease or trait is, but just to make sure that we are all understanding the same terminology, just a little bit of back to school moment here. So each puppy that you have, each individual puppy inherits about 50% of their DNA or genetic material from their mother and 50% from the father. And this is a term called recombination. So that unique combination between the mother and the father for that individual puppy is what makes that puppy sort of its own thing, right? So they're not all, every puppy in a litter is not just multiple twins, right? They're kind of unique. We all have, any living thing has undesirable genetic variants or things that we would rather not have in ourselves or may not want to pass on. You cannot predict exactly which variants and combinations of genes will be inherited in each puppy just by knowing what is in the mother and the father. Because of recombination, there will be that mixing of what you may be getting. So genetic tests are created to identify those important variants and identify potential risks that have been inherited in those puppies. A simple inherited disease means that there's a single specific causal, which means it's going to cause, a variant identified. And many simple diseases have associated DNA tests, particularly breed or dog type specific DNA tests. Risk variant tests, in contrast, may test for multiple variants, or they may only explain part of why a dog may go on to develop a disease, and that the other component of disease development could be either unknown genetic mutations that haven't been identified yet, or environmental factors, or a little bit of both. So as a little gentle review, for simple autosomal recessive conditions, which are the majority currently of DNA tests, for your individual gene, I'm using the example of PRA, which is progressive retinal atrophy. That's a common eye disease across all different kinds of breeds, but particularly in terriers and others. You will either get in an individual dog, a clear test result, which is the green, a uh, affected test result, which is all purple, or carrier, which is the one green and the one purple. So the two blocks are from the mother and the father, and that is the potential combinations an individual puppy may get. So you can make fairly straightforward, fairly confident breeding decisions when you have a simple autosomal recessive disease test or DNA test, because you are, with that knowledge, able to select the partner when breeding on from that puppy that will be the lowest risk or no risk of passing that disease on. For risk variants, for a disease or a condition that has multiple genes involved, it gets a little bit more complicated, as you can see. So for this example, we have 5 genes that we think are contributing to this condition. And then there are many different combinations or recombinations that can happen in an individual dog. And you can see that over the 10 or so dogs that I've given an example of, that there are lots of different levels of risk. And at the top end of the spectrum, they would be at a higher risk of going on to develop whatever this condition is. And at the bottom of the spectrum, they will be at a lower risk. So ideally, we would be aiming to try to identify those dogs that are mostly in the green or all green gene recombinations to use for breeding, right? So in summary, knowing which variants your dog carries gives you options for breeding for health or for the priorities that you're interested in. And we have been focusing understandably about health, but this also goes for the desirable traits that you may be interested in. You may be wanting to select for a particular positive characteristic. Genetic information gives you more precision in selecting for those desirable traits and for avoiding disease risk. So this is why I am particularly supportive of using genetic tests when you're making breeding considerations, because that knowledge will give you so much more precision and so much power to make really informed and responsible decisions. So an example of a DNA test result, and as Embark are my very gracious host today, I pulled off a test report that you can also Google and find for yourself if you are new to Embark and want to see. What you may see in any DNA test result, and Embark does a pretty good job, I think, of doing this, is that you will have some examples, pardon me, you will have a list of multiple different genetic tests or variants that have been tested for in your dog with their test results. Owners in some groups may get a certificate. In some countries, the certificate is required. For panel tests, such as what Embark offers, you get the test results across a number of different genetic tests for diseases and traits. That may also include genetic identification, and it may also include parentage. And in the case of Embark, it could also include some genetic diversity information, depending on what product you're choosing. Understanding those results, though, is what's key to preventing the spread of a specific condition within your breed and within your breeding stock, but it's also key to understanding how you may want to select for desirable traits. What's really beneficial about panel testing options is that you're able to get a much bigger picture the known genetic risks in your breed or in your dog type. And it also is useful in demonstrating how just breeding from clear tested dogs only is not always possible, because again, we all carry those different genetic variants, but it may not actually be desirable, as it would negatively impact genetic diversity. So having that genetic test result across multiple different relevant diseases or relevant conditions or traits, having those test results allows you to have the power to select for that mating the lowest risk or no risk dogs. So what should be included, or what should you look out for in a genetic test result? Well, I would always feel reassured that you have a full name and description about the genetic test, right? So I would expect you to see a common name for the test, in this example, progressive retinal atrophy, and this is a golden retriever form that I've used as an example. I would also expect you to either see or have available the gene name and the variant or mutation, and ideally maybe some research links, so that you are confident that the test that you are testing for is the one that is actually what you want the information from. In the case of progressive retinal atrophy, there are 14 or more different forms and variants that are available, and it's useful to know which ones are relevant to your specific breed or your specific cross. I would expect there to be on your report or somewhere accessible the inheritance, so that you know how you are able to use that test information. And it would give me a lot of confidence to have your dog's name and gender and breed, if applicable, included, again, because mistakes happen, and sometimes you swab the wrong puppy, or sometimes things get mixed up. So having that information included, again, gives more confidence that your results are what you are expecting. And of course, you should have the test result. In this case, Betty, the golden retriever, is a carrier, and either included right with your test result, or perhaps somewhere else in supplemental information. I would hope that you would have some really robust breeding advice for those results. So in this case, it's just a general breeding advice that you would look at kind of yourself and hopefully be able to work out what is meant by that information. But many providers, many test providers have a little bit more detailed information, and I would particularly expect this to be the case if it's for a risk variant rather than a simple inheritance like this form. So now that you have your genetic test results, which are really important and valuable, and you have maybe some clinical results or some scheme information, and you have two dogs you're considering using for breeding, maybe you're feeling a little bit panicked. I hope not. Maybe you had a result that you weren't expecting, or that you're feeling a little worried about. And I want you to take a deep breath and be reminded that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of genes in a dog, and that there are only around 300 to 400 single gene mutation DNA tests across all dog types, which means that many will not be relevant or applicable to your breed. So don't worry if you're having a carrier result or even an affected result right away. You don't need to panic because a tested dog is predictable, and a tested dog is something that you can make an action about. You can do something about that information. What is more risky is to not have test results, because you cannot assume a dog is clear just because it is individually healthier. A known carrier can be safely used for breeding. It should be used for breeding, as integrating these kinds of test results protecting genetic diversity. But bearing that all in mind, many of the diseases that we're concerned about in our dogs do not currently have any kind of a genetic test, and so we're just able to make the decisions based on the information that we have. So what might you want to share with puppy buyers? I think it's important to just be very honest and transparent about what the test results are, and that they shouldn't be anything to be afraid of. I would emphasize the value of health testing is that knowledge and power. I would also talk about the differences between the precision and predictability in clinical or schemes versus genetic test results. It would be useful to focus on breed-specific tests where the most relevance and most importance are able to give, and to try to keep that after-sale communication going. It's really valuable information to your own breeding plans if you know of any health concerns that come up in puppies down the road, and equally valuable to know that everything is tickety-boo and there's nothing to worry about and everything's gone very well. That's also really, really important. So breaking down a little bit more deeply, the value of health testing, when you have that parent's pre-breeding criteria, it allows you, I keep saying this, to create low risk matches and to feel empowered in doing that. And that is particularly the case with genetic tests, where there's that added level of precision and confidence. It's also a wonderful way for you to learn yourself, but also to be able to demonstrate that understanding, that deep understanding of breed-specific risks and traits. And it's part of what you invest in creating healthy, happy, beautiful dogs. As far as puppy testing is concerned, thinking about vet checks and health tests and schemes, that'll be informative about your current puppy's health, um, and that will save you money in the long run. Parentage testing, that assurance of the parents and the breeds, is another value, particularly as it increasingly becomes part of how many dogs are registered. It also prevents misunderstandings, potentially even legal challenges in the future. Disease and trait testing identifies those future risks potentially for identified mutations, but more importantly, again, it allows to be really selective and choosy in how you are pairing your matings to reduce the risks altogether. It's not always very charming to talk about money, but making sure that you are, to the best of your ability, producing healthier dogs is going to be cost savings for you, but also, again, kind of protecting you in the future when puppy buyers are perhaps unsatisfied or unhappy about something. You've been able to be fully informative, and you've been able to be very confident that you and demonstrate that you have made the best steps possible to ensure that your breeding is robust. It's worth incorporating perhaps some of these health test results and this health information in any puppy contracts, and certainly in any packets that you provide new puppy owners with, so that they are also informed for the future. When it comes to specific health test results, I would try to keep it simple with prospective buyers and make sure that you are confident in yourself about what information that you are sharing. For clear or low risk clinical exams or good results, it's very easy to talk about those. It means it's very easy to say that your puppy will either not develop a disease or condition, or is at a much, much lower risk than the breed or within dogs on average. For carriers, it's also quite an easy conversation because, again, your dog will not go on to develop that disease or condition, or will be at a much lower risk. But it is worth having a conversation about, or perhaps considering your puppy contract, how that dog, or if that dog is used for breeding, to make sure that it is paired with a low risk mate for future offspring. If your results are affected or at risk or of concern in any way, whether a genetic test or a clinical test, just be ready to explain the condition and the potential risks and put in perspective what that risk actually means for that dog. In some cases, they may have a genetic health test result for a very late onset condition, and in all honesty, it may not be a condition that the dog develops because their natural lifespan will end before they go on to develop the disease. In contrast, if it's something that is an early onset, you may want to be very thoughtful about what home you would place that dog in, or whether you would want to have that dog or that puppy leave your own care. For many diseases, there's veterinary advice that can be used to either reduce the risk of the disease developing or prevent the disease development completely. There are, for example, some kidney diseases that may have been spoken about before, you may be familiar with, that can be effectively eliminated as a concern for your dog simply by making dietary changes. So in some cases, they can be prevented from developing in the future at all, or you can greatly reduce kind of any risk of discomfort. In either case, if you have this information about a dog being genetically affected or at risk, you have that early warning sign for those late onset or late developing diseases, and you'll be more informed of what to look out for in the future should anything occur. So honesty is always the best policy, and to be very clear in your communication if you do decide to place these puppies in a home, to make sure that everyone is fully informed about the risks and the potentials and the challenges that could come in the future. So some examples, some specific examples of health test results. This is a simple inherited disease in some ways, or the test result, I should say, the test result is a clear carrier or affected result for HUU. And I don't know how I managed to be so lucky as to find a photo of both a Dalmatian and a Bulldog, which are the two breeds that not uncommonly have this condition, but there we go. So there is a genetic test available for the causal variant, and you will get, as a test result, a clear carrier and affected or at risk. And this condition is, I kind of hinted at before, is what causes stones to be developed in the urinary tract, and these stones can form in the bladder, sometimes the kidney, and can be very painful and require surgical removal and can be sometimes very difficult to treat. Only dogs that carry two copies of the variant will be affected and susceptible to the kidney stones, um, but it is not the direct cause of bladder stones in dogs. Other factors, such as maybe a pre-existing liver condition or the diet of the dog, impacts the development and how severe the disease is. So this is an example of, you have your test result, and if it happens to be affected or at risk, there are steps such as veterinary treatment or particularly dietary advice that you can use to prevent any development or risks of, or the likely development or risks of these stones in these breeds. So an example of when the test is simple, as in previous, but a bit complicated, and the advice sort of depends on the breed. And this is my opportunity to talk about how important it is to really get breed-specific advice and not necessarily just general advice for a genetic or any health test result. So many of you may be familiar if you have a long and low breed like I do. I have Pembroke Welsh Corgis of chondrodystrophy, or if you are a Dachshund appreciator, IVDD is something that is probably not unfamiliar to many in those breeds. So there are multiple breeds that are genetically fixed for this condition. And what that means is that these mutations are just kind of part of what makes the breed itself, what makes the breed have its unique physical characteristics. The potential or the extra copy of the gene in this case is found in lots of breeds and lots of different crossbreeds, and it changes the character of the discs that provide the kind of cushion and flexibility in the back of the dog. It is of dominant inheritance, which means you only need one copy to be HGTD. And it is something that is obviously of concern, particularly in those breeds where the mutation is fixed, because if you have a fixed mutation or a nearly fixed genetic mutation, you are not going to be able to kind of breed away from this extra gene. So if it's fixed in the breed, it's important to be honest that this is part of what creates the breed and how the breed was developed, and that there is information on reducing any any consequences or any risks that may be undesirable for having that mutation. So I gave a little example in this little flyer that was provided by the British Dachshund Council that talks about how maintaining good body weight and good muscle and avoiding obesity in your dog is a really excellent and effective way to protect your dachshund from having any future challenges with their intervertebral discs. It's important to provide facts on the risks from trusted resources, such as an independent and research-based resource like DogWellNet or IPF Dogs, or from breed clubs and councils. You may want to consider providing advice or taking out your own insurance to make sure that you have good support should anything go unexpected. And it's really important, particularly if you have a breed which is fixed for the condition, to make some of this information quite clear in puppy contracts. So example of a health test result when the test is just part of the story. And in this case, I'm pivoting from kind of pure genetic tests and into the world of hip and elbow dysplasia. This is where you're trying to make breeding decisions for a complex inherited disease that we know have environmental factors, and that we also know that the genes are very much just part of the story about why a dog may be developing hip dysplasia. So this is our challenge of trying to move from the genetic information that we have, usually from some sort of physical clinical examination, um, to inform on what our likely risks are for future generations. And you can see in the little illustration that as we move from the genotype to the phenotype in the dog's development from the in utero environment or diet or exercise or feed intake, they can change what you see or what you estimate genetically from what you can see in that phenotype. So it can be really challenging to tackle these conditions where you're having to make decisions purely on a clinical examination that may be much more complex genetically than we're able to understand at the moment. There are resources for hip dysplasia, elbow dysplasia, and other similar conditions called estimated breeding values. And these tools, usually through breed clubs or other kind of breed schemes, are a way of trying to use that clinical information to be more specific and informative about the genetic risk by looking at those clinical examination results over multiple generations. This is just another way of kind of saying or describing that, anomalies happen, particularly when you're basing breeding decisions on health test results that are kind of less predictive than genetic test results. And this is why having those kind of thoughtful and robust puppy contracts so that everyone is really well informed about the information that you have and the information that you can't possibly have, and to try to talk to breeder or to new puppy buyers about reducing any environmental risks if you know that you're in a breed that maybe has some of these more complex conditions, and to really focus on providing the facts and not fear. Um, it can be a very exciting process, choosing and buying a puppy, and I'm sure there are other conversations that you have had as dog breeders about informing future puppy owners about their care and maintenance, particularly if you have a breed with a fantastic coat that requires a specific way of managing. But being factual and not fearful about genetic health risks and traits is also kind of really important. If that all feels a little bit overwhelming, both to yourself, but particularly to puppy buyers, it's important to remember that however much they may nibble things off of your carpet, a dog is not a Roomba, right? So a dog is not a washing machine. A dog is not a piece of predictable equipment that we have around our home. And so there has to be some recognition and understanding that as a living creature, there's only so much that we can control and influence through good breeding practices and good animal care, that sometimes things kind of happen, right? Pardon me. But ultimately, a tested dog, a genetically tested dog in particular, is a known dog. You have really good and robust information about the potential health risks or traits. Genetic testing has that extra precision and gives you more options for reducing risks whilst also maintaining genetic diversity and trying to select for those characteristics and traits that are valuable and important to you. Be an informed breeder. Take the time to educate yourself and ask questions about how to use carriers in your breeding in a successful way, how to keep an eye on genetic diversity, both within your own mating plans and particularly in your breed as a whole. And if you want a little bit more support on understanding which genetic or clinical tests are the most valuable to make decisions on, uh, IPFD, IPF Dogs, and the Dog WellNet has something called relevance ratings that gives some more information about how much research is underlying and supporting a specific genetic test, and how different breed clubs and groups around the world view different health priorities. So, whole litter testing, is it worth it? Well, I would say yes. I would say yes, because being informed about your whole litter of puppies is going to be really valuable, not only to how that mating, if that mating has been successful or not in terms of genetic health or genetic risks, but also really being an excellent contribution to understanding the health of your breed as a whole and the genetic risk of your breed as a whole. So in the previous slide, just to move back, we talked about being informed and what tests or diseases are maybe important in relevance ratings. And part of how we know that information is when we actually have genetic test results, right? So why would I invest in whole litter testing? I would invest because parentage is often included or an option within whole litter testing packages. And with the best will and intentions in the world, accidents can happen, right? And so we know within registries, both in North America and abroad, that the registration of puppies and the parents they are assigned to can be wrong anywhere between 10 to 25% of the time. And if that makes you a bit shocked, I will note that in humans, the registration of babies can also be wrong around 10 to 17% of the time. So, in perspective, parentage, apparently is not as much of a guarantee as we all maybe think it is. So having that parentage information is not only critical in making sure that you are registering, if you register your dogs correctly, or being confident that your breeding plans are correct, but it also can provide that extra assurance to puppy owners that the dog that they, or the puppy they think that they are buying, or even, you know, potentially the breed, if that they are buying is actually what they are selecting, right? And increasingly internationally, and I would expect within North America as well, registries, breed clubs, and kennel clubs will start expecting parentage to be incorporated more and more in that registration process. For the individual dog's benefit, you're also getting that kind of permanent ID potentially, and that dog-specific genetic information. Because remember, when we were talking about what the health results could be for genetic tests, it won't be that every single puppy in that litter necessarily will have the same result, particularly if you've used a carrier in your breeding program. So you want to make sure that you know, a tested dog is a predictable dog. You want to know what that dog's individual results are. For some groups, Embark included, you also may have genetic diversity information, and I believe Embark even has coefficient information or genetic diversity information for each puppy. I know that Embark uses a lot of genetic markers for their, maybe one of the most on the market, genetic markers for their genetic diversity tests. So that is a really good way of having that kind of extra information. And if you're worried about costs, everyone wants to be mindful of that, particularly now. Um, it can maybe seem a bit daunting if you're paying out the cost of litter testing, whole litter testing in the moment, but it is a relatively small percentage of costs that you would be passing on to your puppy buyers, your individual puppy buyers, and provides so much information, so much specific information to those dogs that I would think you could have a pretty easy time convincing puppy owners that it's important for them to have their own dog specific information. So what happens if you maybe don't invest in some genetic testing, or you don't kind of understand what may be beneficial for your dog? And I try not to pick too terrifying of photos, but let's kind of look at the numbers a little bit. Sorry to talk about money, but here we are again. If you're unlucky enough to have a dog that develops congenital now here I'm going to stumble. I have not had enough coffee this morning. Keratoconjunctivitis sicca or ichthyoform dermatosa, and all the vets can, mock me in a minute about that. If you're looking at treatment of that CKSID, you're looking between $250 to $2,500 US dollars, plus monthly eye drops for that dog's life in the $20 to $50 range. And there's a genetic test for this that could prevent this. For glaucoma, not every form of glaucoma has a genetic test, but there's about a $900 average cost of treatment. Many do have breed-specific genetic tests, and there is a clinical test available for glaucoma for many, many breeds. If you're unlucky enough to have a dog that develops those urate stones that we talked about earlier, where there is a genetic test and there's diet that can kind of prevent some of that development, you're again in the $1,000 to $4,000 US dollars emergency treatment. And I'm sorry to say, again, not to scare you, that this is not unique. Fraudulent dog sales, where people have been claiming a dog is a breed that it is not, or claiming parentage that a puppy does not have, that has been in the $2,000 to $25,000 US dollar range. So spending that little relatively small amount of money to have a dog tested, or do a whole litter testing and get that information, maybe doesn't seem like such a bad monetary decision. And even more than that, of course, and I know this is all of your priorities really, is, what's the value of the health and welfare of our furry family members, right? We all want to be confident about that. So for that cost to puppy buyers of a few bags of good quality dog food or raw diet, if you're a raw diet person, they get that permanent unremovable ID, and they get genetic disease and trait screening. You're contributing to research that benefits dogs now and in the future, particularly with genetic diversity testing and other testing information. You could have some very important preventative veterinary care options or cost savings for veterinary care by catching conditions and diseases before they become, um, into a very challenging area of treatment. And ultimately, you're just so clearly demonstrating to everyone that you are being transparent and honest in your dog breeding and really committed to doing the right thing. So finally, to finish and summarize, and these are my two dogs on the Oregon coast having a good little sniff around. A tested dog is a predictable dog. And the value to the puppy buyer is, you're spending a little bit now for those genetic test results, but at a reduction of vet bills or risks or worry in the future. You're also getting protection as a breeder by providing that transparency, that proof of parentage, health risks or not, and of potentially for breed or breed type. That permanent identification can be a really important component for a lot of people. And all this information that you provide by genetic testing does help to kind of contribute that data for researchers and genetic diversity information in particular to help look into diseases and conditions in the future. And many registration bodies and breed clubs either already require it or will require it in the future. So now it's kind of a time to get ahead of the trend and what's coming down the road. So for some resources, just to finish up, this is my last slide. I'm sure that Embark has a ton of their own specific resources that you can find out about their specific tests. And I know that if you're using Embark tests, you're getting lots of information about your own dog and your own breed. But if you'd like to look around or do a little further research or get a little bit more deep into that information, you can look at the Harmonization of Genetic Testing for Dogs program, which is on dogwellnut.com, that provides that breed-specific and type-specific genetic tests information and research. This is also a place where you can find where upcoming research is. So maybe if you're in a breed that has a condition that doesn't currently have a genetic test, you may be able to contribute to that research or find out more information there. For the clinical exams and schemes, we have a health strategies database for dogs that covers that information. And we also provide a fun little project called Get a Grip, which gives a whole dog health data information about your breed and type. There's information on Pedigree Breeds database if you want a little more in-depth information. And we also have kind of events and education options that may be useful to you in the future. So thank you all for listening. I hope you all feel really informed and really excited and really motivated to think about your breeding programs and genetic testing and how you can come up with great ways to provide that information to your puppy buyers. So I think Lisa or someone will be helping me for any questions.
Thanks, Amy. That was a great presentation. I love a tested dog is a predictable dog. That's just a great tagline. I'm taking that home with me today.
My gift to you.
Okay, so let's jump into some questions. First, I just wanted to share that phone number that an attendee was asking about earlier to speak with a genetics expert by phone. So the phone number is 224-274-2245. And I'll bring that phone number up again at the end of our summit today for people who have questions and want to reach us via telephone. Also, there were quite a few questions in here related to Embark, which we will get to via email. One of them was also, are you going to get copies of the slides and recordings of the sessions today to review later? And yes, the entire summit will be available. You'll get an email from LabRoots saying it's available, most likely today. And it's available for 12 months, and you can see the sessions that way as well. So, all right, I'm going to just, I wanted to. Here was a question about, you had mentioned needing a certificate of proof for DNA testing in other countries. Can you
Mhm.
give us an example of this?
Yes, so for some countries, as part of their own genetic schemes, they will require a certificate that kind of proves that the dog that has been tested the sample was taken by a vet or a veterinary professional, and that the mouth swab has the ID has been confirmed by an independent source. So in some countries there are schemes for particular diseases and conditions that are really important to be tested for, or there may even be restrictions on breeding from those animals. So to ensure that the right dog is being tested, you're required to have your dog be sampled, have their ID confirmed, and be sampled by an independent person. In most cases, in many, many cases, the breed clubs themselves will run like genetic testing kind of days that they will invite a vet to kind of come in and do the swabs and confirm ID for you at that time. And these tend to be very breed specific and usually pretty awful conditions, because that is what would motivate a breed to really push hard to have these conditions tested for correctly. Now, again, part of why it's useful to have genetic identification or that information is that takes care of confirming the ID for you when you're taking that test. You're not having to rely on microchips alone, or if you're in sporting groups, or this might be a little old-fashioned, but some people still use tattooing as ear markers as well. So that is where you may need a certificate from the testing laboratory or the research group that's undertaking those tests to confirm those test results.
Yeah, great. Talk about old school. I remember having to do nose prints to bring my dogs into Canada for Canadian registration. That was fun to get
Yeah.
those. Okay, here's a question about, you had talked about if a condition was fixed in a breed and how to talk to puppy buyers about that. But this question is,
Mm.
what about an at-risk result that won't affect the breed? How would you explain that to a potential puppy buyer?
I think the most important thing to remember when you're talking about at risk is that the facts are where it's going to be helpful for anyone to make decisions, whether it's yourself making a decision or the puppy buyer. So making sure that you understand what the condition is, or the disease is, and what the symptoms are, and when the average onset time, whether it's early in a dog's life or later in a dog's life, so that you can be really confident and reassuring what a puppy owner may look out for and what may expect, to also kind of have some relative or perspective giving information as well. A dog can certainly be genetically affected or have a genetic at-risk result and never go on to develop the disease. So in some cases, it may never be a problem in that breed. In other cases, it may be somewhat of a guarantee that that will happen. And that information probably would come from, I would imagine if you're using an Embark product, you could talk to one of your that phone number that you gave, a geneticist or a veterinary knowledgeable person that can give you some guidance on that. But there's also independent resources as well, or in addition to that, you can look into the specifics of that condition and what those risks are. If there are management or treatment or preventative steps that you can take, having those ready for your new owner is really important as well. Just again, as a somewhat simple example, if you're looking at the urate stones, have that information on the appropriate diet for that breed ready and part of your puppy communication and part of your sale and part of your handover, so that that new owner is really confident about reducing those risks where they can through an environmental change is what's kind of really important. So don't be afraid, be honest, be thoughtful in your puppy contract about that information. And, you know, you don't have to scare them, but definitely just be confident in the knowledge that you have and be honest where you don't always know what the outcome may be, and that's part of the risk that they're taking. Again, a dog is not a Roomba, right? So we're always taking a little bit of a risk, even with the best genetic test results in the world, right? They're living
Great.
creatures.
Yes, exactly. So one more question before we go. A breeder's asking, how can we reach out to IPFD to update breed requirements for the breed? Is there a good contact email that they should reach out to? Or
You can certainly email me directly, though I have, as Lisa, bless her, can attest, one of the most challenging names, which gives me one of the most challenging email addresses. So you can also just go to the website, dogwellnet.com, and there are forms that you can fill in to update information or to find information. And you can also email us via info@ipfdogs.com, and that will get you to either me or the appropriate person to make any changes and updates to our website.
okay, great. Thank you so much, Aimée. We'll be back in about 5 minutes for the next presentation. It'll be my presentation on from Pair Predictor to how to swab a whole litter of puppies with some adorable video. So be sure to join us in a couple of minutes. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.